everybody. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. It's a minute past. I'm Nicole Smeltikop, and this is my colleague Lisa Lorenzo, and we're from Michigan State University. And today we'll be talking about some of our workflows around cataloging and authorities within FOLIO and VuFind. So first up, just a little agenda of what we're planning to cover today. We'll go over some background, who we are, and all that good stuff. And an overview of our cataloging and authorities workflows at the library, and then how we also integrate VuFind in, and how we communicate and collaborate across the library, because these projects affect lots of different units within the library. And then we'll wrap up with questions. Oh, and I forgot to also mention our other person who worked on this is our colleague Autumn Faulkner, who is on Zoom. So she will be, she's waving and happy to answer questions and things as we move along. So who are we? So MSU is a large R1 research university. We have 8 million volumes and 10 million titles. So yeah, we've been a fun adventure, I think, for EBSCO as we've worked through migrating and figuring things out. And we also include several branch libraries, as well as we share our catalog with our state government library, the Library of Michigan. And then we also include a large remote storage facility. And yeah, as far as our migration, we came from Sierra. We migrated in June of 2022. And when we originally migrated, we were using EDS as our main discovery tool for the catalog, but we've since switched to VuFind in May of 2023, though we still have EDS as well. So yeah, we were an early adopter of innovative systems. We've been using them for over 20 years. And yeah, Sierra had the online public interface catalog, or OPAC, was combined. So the back end and the front end were pretty seamlessly connected. So if a cataloger updated something or created a new record, you could see it on the public interface instantaneously, which was really useful for our workflows because it was a lot easier. There was more white space, so you could, I would use it a lot to check that my typos and things were okay. By contrast, Folio, as we know, doesn't have a public discovery layer for inventory, and authorities is a separate app. So this requires more intentional coordination between these areas. So here's a brief overview of our workflows. So first, catalogers create our records in connection, and then we export a MARC file that then we import into Folio using data import. And these are via customized data import job profiles. I think we're up to about 6 now. And these job profiles are designed to create the holdings in the item records based on customized 949 subfields. And I'll cover that a bit more as we get deeper into the presentation. Next, VuFind then uses the OMI PMH feed to harvest the catalog changes, and this updates every 30 minutes. So any changes to records in Folio, depending on when you catalog, can take 30 minutes to 5 minutes. It depends when you happen to hit that the timing. And then at the end of the month, any MARC records that have that new catalog date for the month are gathered and sent to Backstage for authority enhancements. And the authorities team, led by our fearless Lisa, performs this cleanup and maintenance related to those Backstage reports. All right, so we'll start with talking a bit about the cataloging piece of our workflows. So as mentioned, our descriptions are created in connection and then imported into Folio. Generally, we do these in small batches. These range from about 1 to 10 records, depending on the cataloger's preference Obviously, our copy catalogers can go a lot faster than our original catalogers. For myself, I found I used to do bigger batches, but Folio does not like duplicate MARC records in the data import file. So I found going one at a time made things Folio happier and me happier. So yeah, I do one at a time personally. But yeah, others have different workflows that work for them. And catalogers are almost always overlaying on existing suppressed instance records that are brought in by our acquisitions team. And these job profiles in data import do mappings in the 949 string to match the correct instance, unsuppress records, add a cat date, create and populate holdings, and create and populate items. So yeah, our slides are in, I never know how to say it, sketch, whatever, the thing, if anyone wants to look at any of the links that are provided in the slides as we go through. So we use Confluence for all of our technical services documentation, and there's a link here if you want to view our site. Because most cataloging work is done in connection, most of the documentation for at least cataloging is focused on connection. And I will note, if anyone clicks on it, that some of our documentation is still awaiting updates from Sierra workflows. So yeah. If you look at things and things don't make sense in a folio context, that's probably why. There is an update date in there, so you can kind of see if it's more recent, it's folio. So the folio specific workflows that our catalogers routinely complete include importing records into folio, creating bound with relationships, now that we're on Poppy, between our inventory records, and creating stub records for uncatalogued materials temporarily stored in our remote storage facility. And we'll go through those a bit with a link to the corresponding documentation. So here's an example of our beautiful 949 mapping table that Autumn created. That goes over the 949 field mappings to import records into Folio. So using those data import files, Autumn created these mappings that map specific subfields in the 949 field to instance holdings and item record information. And this is how new instance holdings and item records are created. And they include the information automatically. And the table also notes whether it's required or optional for data import, which has been really helpful as well. And because the staff interface of Folio requires a lot of scrolling and clicking around, we found that if we need to create like a new holdings or a new items record, is actually easier to use data import and just overlay on the existing inventory record. So this has been really helpful in speeding up our policy or procedures. So another one that I mentioned is our bound with documentation, which is still kind of getting flushed out because we upgraded to Poppy a month-ish ago. So as people are working through this, we're editing and making it better. As seen here, so our documentation also includes suggestions like opening two windows to make things a little easier. So it's not just going through the software itself, but also providing some like tips and tricks for making things go a little smoother. And lastly, here's an example of our stub record workflow. So what this is we have unprocessed archival material in our special collections unit that they want to store offsite in our remote storage facility, but the boxes need barcodes that are held in item records in the catalog. So we kind of create a stub record because since they haven't been processed, they haven't been cataloged yet. So this is our little one for special collections folks to kind of create an inventory record in Folio. So yeah, as mentioned, in Sierra, catalogers could instantly view our records. We got really attached to that. Um, it, as mentioned here, contributes to a general understanding of how the mark fields behaved and permitted a more direct feedback loop. It was really nice to see like, oh, I made an error on that coding. Let me just fix it really quick and see it instantaneously and not have to remember to go back in 30 minutes and find it. Although we love VuFind. That's but the lag time does mean less immediate checking of materials. And it's resulted in a reduced awareness of our mark field displays. And when problems are noticed, changing how things are displayed is handled outside of technical services, and we'll get into how that's handled. But it, yeah, it creates some need for communication and collaboration. And yeah, we've been working lately on kind of taking a deeper dive into seeing what fields are and are not automatically mapped for display in VuFind, or what's under like the further information. I forgot what that. Do you remember what the, I guess like further information, like you have to click on something in VuFind to have more of the, yeah, and staff view. There's more clicking that has to be done sometimes to see some areas of this description. And so we're looking at moving that around a bit. I'll take it. Lisa's turn.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about our authorities workflow kind of at alternately at a high level and then in a little bit more detail too. So the context here is that we use the Mark Authorities app to manage all of our authority records that show up in the catalog, or at least hopefully all or most of them. And just to give like I said, a quick overview of what our workflow looks like. As Nicole mentioned, we're sending new cataloging records to our authorities vendor Backstage every month. And in order to do this, we use the reporting app, formerly the LDP app, because this is actually the only way, at least as far as I know, to get records by cataloged date. And at this point, we're only grabbing newly cataloged records with this method, because unfortunately using a field like metadata updated date would be casting too wide a net and would be picking up a lot of records that have updates done that like weren't relevant to authorities necessarily. And since we're paying our vendor per record, that's going to add up really quickly and become unsustainable. We're thinking of changing this procedure slightly, since it's kind of a disadvantage that we aren't also getting updated records to resend to the vendor as needed. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. But for now, we're just doing, our authority maintenance is just focused on newly cataloged records. And the reporting app also has its limitations in kind of how it functions and how it works. But it works well enough for us. And I end up with a list of UUIDs, which I can then take to data export, get a mark file, send that to our vendor, which works pretty well. And then Backstage does quite a bit of work for us. They add URIs to subject, name, and genre fields wherever possible. And they also do some cleanup and RDA enhancement, little things like fixing title skip indicators. A nice one too that they do is for like subject headings. If someone put in a variant form by accident, it'll change it to the authorized form, like a bunch of things like that. So at that point, we receive mark files from Backstage once their processing is complete. So updated bib records, plus any new or changed authority records, which we then bring back in with data import. And in addition to this maintenance, there's also a secondary monthly process where Backstage sends us any new or changed authority records based on the copy of our authority file that they have. So things like replacements for canceled headings, changed headings, so on and so forth. And then in that case, we don't need to export or send anything to them. I just import the new files with data import. And then kind of the more interesting stuff, bibliographic and authority file maintenance. These are all the things that flow out of all the vendor work that's done. And I want to say the absolute most important thing to mention here is that the reason we're able to do the amount of work in this area that we do is because we have 2 full-time staff who are dedicated to bibliographic and authority file maintenance. And also they're just the best. They're really great at their jobs. So we are able to do quite a bit. And also in part because of that staff time, we aren't really making use of BibAuth linking yet, even though I know those features are available in Folio that would kind of take care of some of this. There's also some other reasons for that choice. I'll talk more about that in a couple of slides too. But for now, I'll just say that our staff use a combination of individual record editing and batch workflows, mostly in MarcEdit, to do all of our authority maintenance. So some examples of the tasks they do include deleting deprecated headings from the MarcAuthority app, and then either going through bib records and either replacing or deleting those headings from bib records. They update changed headings in bibliographic records, and then also just a variety of other data quality cleanup tasks. We get a few reports from Backstage that give us things like lists of near matches or partial matches, or just like a list of headings that didn't match to anything, which is just like an absolute treasure trove of work for all three of us. Where there's like, sometimes it's a simple case where it's like obvious that there was like a typo or something that we can go in and fix. Other times you need a little bit more investigation to figure out what's going wrong. But all of that is ultimately kind of satisfying and really useful work because it, of course, improves discovery to make sure that all of our control vocabularies are functioning as well as they can. So outside of those like common vocabularies that we use, which are probably what most, at least American libraries use, like the Library of Congress subject headings and so on, we also actually have 2 local authority files, which so far these have been a little bit trickier to manage in Folio. It's important to note here, we're still just on Poppy in our production environment, but we have Quiznalia in test as of fairly recently. But so as far as our actual local authority files, we have 2. We have one that's kind of the typical stuff you would expect to find in there, things like local series, maybe a handful of names that didn't have enough information about to put into like the Library of Congress name authority file. And then we have a second local authority file, which is actually from our authorities vendor, which is centered around subject headings and name headings for Indigenous peoples, which are a lot more accurate and respectful than what's typically available in the Library of Congress subject headings and name authorities. So as far as like folio functionality in the MarcAuthority app, at least as of Poppy, if you have vocabularies that aren't included in sort of like the default list of authority sources that was in there, things got lumped together. I don't know if you can really see it that well on these screenshots, but on the left, there's our authority source facet in the MarcAuthority app, and there's just like 13,000 some headings all lumped under not specified. So that would be all of both of those 2 local authority files kind of like smushed together in there. Whereas with Quiznalia on the right, you can see, well, again, maybe you can't, but I added a new authority file for Backstage Indigenous Peoples vocabulary. So we have these options now in Quiznalia to add new authority sources, which will help us more easily manage these. And my ultimate goal is to get a better handle on what even we have in our local authority file, and ideally get rid of some of those because I'm sure some of them are not needed. And I won't go into a ton of detail about this unless people want to ask questions about it later. But I did want to note too, with this new feature, when you add a new authority file source, it doesn't automatically then go in and change everything. You give it the prefix to look for on the 001 field of the authority record. But if you then you have to like kind of trigger a reindex. So either by updating an individual record or doing what I did, which is like kind of a wacky combination of using the MarcAuthority storage, I think API, data export and data import, you can then re-import those authority records and have it refresh and then be pretty and nice like that other facet. So besides local authority management, there are a few other upcoming improvements that we're working towards now, or at least starting to think about. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not totally happy with our reliance on catalog date and the reporting app to pull records to send to our authority management vendor. So Autumn and I, and like actually mostly Autumn, have started working on a new way of gathering records that uses a statistical code instead. So ideally what will happen with this code is that it'll either be entered automatically during data import on the job profiles that catalogers are using when they're either creating new records or overlaying existing records with an updated OCLC record. So currently we're missing all those overlaid records, which is a problem because catalogers might be bringing in a fully new version of that record, and then that would then delete all those URIs that our vendor had previously added. So that statistical code would then allow us to grab those records and send them back to the vendor for reprocessing, essentially. And that code could also be manually added by catalogers too, in cases where maybe they're just editing a single record in QuickMark and do something to change one of the authority headings. And then that would signal to me that it needs to be exported again for reprocessing. And then the other important step is that when I re-import those processed records from the vendor, that statistical code would then be removed. So that's a separate job profile that would have that step to remove the code. We're still experimenting with this, so we're not using this process yet. But fingers crossed that will help quite a bit with our authority control processes and keep everything more up to date. And then a couple of things that we're kind of just still keeping an eye on as things develop in Folio. One is the bulk edit app. For now, just with the features that are available as a Poppy, we haven't been able to use it for our workflows, but I know there's a lot more features and options coming in the near to medium term future. So we're keeping an eye on that to see if maybe there will be instances where that is more efficient than using our current like mark edit based workflows. And then finally, we're also keeping informed on enhancements to bib auth linking. For now, there's kind of like two big obstacles that are preventing us from using that. The big one, or one of those is the fact that it's just record by record at this point. And since we have like close to 7 million records in our catalog, we need to wait for some like bulk editing updates, which I think are on the roadmap, or I'm pretty sure are on the roadmap for someday. So once those come along, I think we'll be doing a big reevaluation of that. And then the other issue, which is on us, is the fact that since the bib auth linking relies on the subfield 0, your subfield 0 actually has to be correct in order for the linking to be useful. There was a stretch of time with our vendor where we were allowing them to add URIs for partial matches of subject headings. So when you have like a subdivided long subject string, the URI may only match like the subfield A. So my understanding is if we were then to link on that, we would kind of maybe lose those subdivisions, or at least like the link wouldn't match really the full heading. So I'm not sure how we will ultimately address that, but that's another thing that is kind of on our radar. These are just a couple screenshots of that statistical code process that I mentioned in case that is useful for anybody. I won't stay on these, but like Nicole mentioned, our slides are up in Sched/Sketch in case anyone is interested in looking at those. Okay, and then this is my last slide on authority stuff. But a couple other things that we're focused on at the moment. But we're hoping to soon finally update about 90,000-ish records that in order to reflect some changes in the rare books genre vocabulary, RBMS. If you're not familiar with that group, they made some changes in the last couple of years where they had like a whole bunch of separate vocabularies and they have now combined them into one, which has changed like pretty much all of the headings, and they now have URIs and so on and so forth. But now with the recent, and well, let me back up a second. The reason we hadn't done this yet was because with some of the limitations in data import with big batches, since obviously this is like a ton of records by data import standards, it kind of was just sort of seemed out of reach for us to be able to do this. But now with like some of the data slicing features that have become available, this seems like much more doable. So we're going to be hopefully working on that pretty soon. We also have some ongoing projects within authorities, but also with like kind of the library at large related to harmful language remediation in our control vocabularies. And when we were first like thinking about these within the last, I don't know, few years or so, we had thought there'd be a lot of batch processing and global changes involved here, which as it turns out was extremely naive. Many of these are really going to be more labor intensive and kind of like record by record with a lot of recataloging essentially. But as just to kind of address this, as some examples of pilot projects that we have going on now, one is a pilot project to begin using the homosaurus vocabulary, which if you're not familiar with that, it's a vocabulary that is much more detailed than your kind of like mainstream controlled vocabularies as far as dealing with LGBT related topics. So that work is ongoing. We're also starting to think about the best way to handle authority maintenance for homosaurus since they don't publish MARC authority records. So this means either we or our vendor would have to create MARC authority records that we could put in the MARC authority app, or maybe we'll hold off on this and wait and see how some of the entity management features end up panning out in future Folio releases and see kind of what additional choices we have there. We also have another big project with our authorities vendor that I kind of alluded to earlier with the indigenous peoples vocabulary, where this is a case where it's actually in many cases like a one-to-one or one-to-many heading replacement rather than any kind of like recataloging. But that's just another file that we manage and keep up to date with Mark Authority app, and then also display in our public catalog. And then finally, I'm working with our LGBTQ librarian to update subject headings for materials related to transgender people to make use of some different Library of Congress subject headings that weren't maybe initially available when those records were first cataloged. And then this is another one that's like kind of a combination of record by record editing and a little bit of batch processing. And I will also want to add here that the new inventory advanced search that came with Poppy, I think, has been super, super helpful for finding some of those headings that we want to update or delete. Okay, back to Nicole.
Alrighty, so now we're go on to how we use VuFind for cataloging work. Oh, oops, wrong button. There we go. Alrighty, so VuFind, our VuFind instance is hosted internally by a team of 3 people, affectionately known as PubCat for Public Catalog. Our timeline for implementation was very quick. So we developed a working group of stakeholders to assist in prioritizing development work once the initial implementation was complete. And also there, on other projects, they work in like an agile Jira environment. So this was a familiar way to set up the work for them. And overall, as I kind of mentioned before, we're so happy with VuFind. And yeah, our delightful colleagues who run it and keep it going for us. We do supplement some of our cataloging work with VuFind functionality because of some of the limitations of Folio. One example of this is the call number browse. This is typically used for us for shelf listings, to make sure that we don't have 2 things with the same call number, and that the shelf listing will be in alphabetical order by author for cutters and all that good stuff. So again, and this is, it's not instantaneous. So you can kind of look, but to see it actually in our VuFind instance to look at the display, we have to wait for that harvest, which isn't awful, but it just kind of does create a little bit of a barrier. I was going to show an example of why we use VuFind. So here I am, and if anyone, like I said, we're on Poppy, and I am not by any means a Folio expert, so I might be using it a little wrong. But when I type in other posters with a different number, it comes up. And these are a little odd, I will say, because they're in a bound width relationship because they're stored in a box that's the item record. So when I type in the call number, it does not come up in Folio. So I rely exclusively on VuFind to find it. And then I get a nice list of all my call numbers, and it makes my little cataloging heart really happy. So that's how I use it.
And then just to mention too, another great discovery benefit of sort of authorities work in VuFind is that our Mark Authorities app also powers a few browse features that are included in the public catalog. So subject, author, and series browse. I believe subject and author definitely. Series, I believe, is also Mark Authority app. But at any rate, the nice thing about this too is that it also shows variant forms of names in particular. So if someone were to type in like an alternate spelling of a name, it will direct them to the authorized form where they can browse where it actually is in the list. And this is also a good tool for finding errors because, as I'm sure we all know, anytime you look at your data in a different interface, you're bound to notice things that you didn't see before, which is, I guess, kind of a blessing and a curse. Because now you know about all the errors, and maybe that's good for fixing them, or maybe it's a nightmare. It depends. Okay, and then our last sort of section here is about communication and collaboration, which is an area we've had to put a lot of thought into sort of before, during, and after our migration to Folio. So kind of one of the big highlights of our communication sort of framework at the MSU libraries is the cataloging or the catalog development advisory working group, also known as CDOG. This has 8 members from across the library, and the charge specifies what groups those members need to come from. So this includes people from cataloging, authorities, collections, reference, and special collections. And all the members serve 2-year rotating terms so that we get new people on periodically. And they work with our backend development team, known as PubCat for Public Catalog, to develop team priorities related to VuFind functionality and display. We also have a distribution email list so that others in the library can contact the group directly with sort of any ideas they have or things they notice that aren't working properly. And then we also have an email form directly on the public catalog so that any user of the catalog could also email us with any issues or ideas that they have. Also important to note that those emails also go to our reference and discovery services unit. So those are like kind of our frontline people for fielding and directing questions from the public. So in that way, if there's things that come in through that email form that maybe aren't directly related to the catalog functionality, or maybe there's like a different issue going on, it's really helpful to have them know where to direct those questions. And a future improvement that I think the group is thinking about is also increasing the frequency of reporting out on the group's work, sort of like just at least to the library as a whole, just getting in the habit of doing that as often as possible to make sure everyone's up to date on what's going on. Just a few examples of things that CDOG has sort of been involved in working on. Just a note that VuFind out of the box is pretty bare bones as far as like what metadata it displays. So with a lot of cataloger involvement, there are now many more MARC fields being displayed to the public than compared to the original launch about 1.5 years-ish ago. And one of those is in this screenshot here. There's one of the particular fields that people really wanted to make sure was displayed well was when we have items with transliterated titles, making sure that the original language displays right there at the top of the record and is readable. Also, there were some updates to improve known item searches. I'm going to look at one of our developers and make sure I'm getting this right, but I believe searches no longer use stop words at all. So that improved known item searches quite a bit. So words like stop words, meaning like articles like the or a or an, and I believe just limited to English for the moment. Previously, those words were stripped out of searches, thinking that that would make searches more accurate because those are kind of like most of the time junk words. But it turns out when you're doing known item searches, sometimes you actually do need the full string, including all of those little extra words in order to get the best results. One example I always like to bring up is the book It by Stephen King. Yeah, I hear laughs, which means people know what I'm talking about. So if you tried to search that and you have stop words active, like good luck finding that book. But now, given this change, you actually do find it, which is great. And then also numerous accessibility improvements too, especially in like making sure that our pages are navigable by users with screen readers, and so on and so forth. And then outside of CDOG, we also have a lot of other sort of cross-unit communications, of course. We have big meetings with all of the cataloging and metadata management folks, so usually every other week, which is just a great time for all of us to get together and share any issues we've run into or like workarounds we've figured out for various things. Also, this is really great because not every single person is involved or as involved with like the folio interest groups. So those of us who are able to sort of share out to the broader group any updates that are coming up or like changes and things like that, which is really nice. Also, there's biweekly meetings between head of authority management, so me and head of cataloging, Autumn, to sort of coordinate on projects and discuss issues in the catalog. I think something that's probably pretty unique at MSU since we have a dedicated authorities staff, is that I don't really do any cataloging. So, but obviously like authorities and cataloging are like inextricably linked. So that coordination is really important so that if I notice something that maybe requires some like updates to cataloging policy, then Autumn and also Nicole can work with catalogers on that. I can make sure that any changes I want to make aren't going to interfere with their work. And so just important to have that regular meeting between us. And then also due to some like reorganization at the library that's imminent, we're also going to be having a lot more coordination between collections and technical services. And since that hasn't quite taken shape yet, we're not sure exactly how that's going to pan out, but I think we're all really optimistic that that's going to be another really great area for collaboration. So just some quick conclusions. In general, we found that the Folio architecture brings a lot more flexibility, like customization, local control, and so on, which is great, but also some more fragmentation in terms of resource description and public discovery and the resource description to public discovery pipeline, I guess. And as usual, the lesson always, forever, for everything is that communication is really important. And particularly feedback loops. So when people report issues to us, we need to make sure, or we've been making a lot of effort to be sure that we're also communicating back when those things get fixed or when changes are made, and just ensuring that communication kind of goes both ways. And then another kind of like interesting point maybe, we found that at MSU, our units and procedures were really structured around our old system, so Sierra's modules, and we're still in the process of kind of slowly adjusting that. So, and that will continue to happen. But yeah, that's all we have for now. Happy to answer any questions or comments. Oh, and if you have questions, we have the microphones up here. We can run them around too. Oh, is there some in chat? Okay, I'm just looking at the chat.
I'm fielding some of the questions in the chat, Lisa, but we've got one question from Paul about if we can highlight some more of the Mark VuFind display tweaks that we thought were most important or transformative.
You have some in mind?
I haven't been in.
Or Autumn, if you know of any others specifically. I'm blanking on specific ones. I know there's been maybe some of the notes.
Yes, so there's sort of this in our VuFind display, an above the fold, right, area. And I think we have kind of gone back and forth about what should be there and what should be further down where users might have to scroll. I believe variant titles are now shown above the fold. I'm drawing a blank though. It's been the out of the box configuration for VuFind is somewhat bare bones. So a lot of the work that we've been doing has actually just been sort of building in what you would typically expect to see, kind of the author title variants, imprint, making sure that that's all correct. So it's been more like, sorry, I'm getting like a sun biting the sun here. Sorry. So it's been more of like making sure the basics are covered and resolving any errors we note. I hope that helps.
Assist us.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we've have a ton of customizations for VuFind. Lots of links with the MARC records and the way we import them. So we've got a custom file in VuFind to import MARC records, but it's changed a lot from the default. But all our customizations are available online on GitHub, if you know where to look. So I guess I'll try to send a link so that people can take a look at that.
Thanks. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, that they're all available. I'll also add too, I thought of another one. This is ongoing work, but as far as subject headings, there's been some tweaks to, there's a lot of times on copy cataloging, we're getting like sort of random subject vocabularies included in our bib records, many of which we don't maintain. Or like sometimes they're vocabularies that are defunct, but like people still use them. So we're working on not showing those in the public display just because since they're so unevenly applied in the catalog, it would be kind of misleading if someone were to like click on one expecting to find everything under that particular topic. They would find nowhere near everything we have on that. So that's another tweak. Also, I see someone asked in chat, what discovery layer are your users accessing when they search the library catalog? And that is VuFind. Yep, well, bottom just put it in there too. Perfect. I'm glad we agreed. Oh, there's then two.
Hey, Lisa, how are you importing the MARC authority records to VuFind?
With data import.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
you export them from data import,
Or export, yeah. Well, so wait for
how are they discoverable, the MARC authority records from VuFind?
so people aren't searching the authority records in VuFind. They're just that browse of like the name and subject browse. They're able to get
Okay,
them
so you're
there.
just using contributor in
Yeah.
the search the subject browse that you see in inventory. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sorry to make you run a marathon there. So we have a great folio VuFind setup. We aren't using OAI PMH yet, so we have a daily legacy extract. So I'm jealous of your 30-minute situation, but we're looking to move to OAI PMH this winter. And given that 30 minutes isn't I get it, right? You want it instantaneous. I'm wondering if you investigated the possibility of also having a manual trigger to do an OAI PMH update, like have your catalogers be able to press a button somewhere and have that go manually when you want to.
I don't want to really keep like passing the mic to Damien. I don't think we have because it might be a sort of a resourcing issue, I would assume.
Okay, we're always investigating ways to speed that up, but we're hosted by EBSCO, and I think they don't want to have too frequent harvests. But that's a work in progress.
Wait, did you have a response for that specific thing? Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Nicole. You're a hero.
This is probably to Damien as well, so I was going to talk about it later. But the 8 million records might be a limit to this. So this is I have it almost on continuous IPMH. Basically, it's a 3-minute sleep after the first one, and then then do it again. It's just on a continuous pseudo daemon. So that might be a solution. Might also be a solution too. But 8 million. But my catalog is only 300,000, so limit is totally different.
Leila, did you have a question too? Oh, okay. That's fine. Okay. We still have 5 minutes too. So there's a
This is not about OAI PMH. So going back to the authorities, I'm going to have 2 authority files. So once you actually do start doing linking, potentially an automated linking, so you will be Backstage will only be working with the one authority file, and then you'll be linked. That's what I'm just.
yeah. That's I mean
The managing 2 authority files. It's something I've been thinking of because originally our medical library wanted to have their own, and I said I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah, we have, so I guess technically we have more than 2 because we also, so there's the 2 local ones and there's also like the Library of Congress subject headings, like Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus and like a small handful of other vocabularies that we have in there too that we use. And
But they're all in one.
oh yeah, they're all like in
Yeah.
Mark Authority app together, just as far as like, yeah. To be totally honest, I haven't even thought that far ahead yet.
I know it's a long way ahead.
Because there's so many there's like all these other implications too if we were to even partially automate some of this as far as like the two staff who are in the authorities unit, like how is their work going to change and like what other things would they be working on then as a result of like some of their day-to-day duties potentially being automated, which is something that I want to be extremely like careful about. But yeah, as far as like what then the vendor would do versus what Folio would do, I feel like a lot of like the changes and things like that, they wouldn't like that role from the vendor would be less important. And then I also wonder too about like maybe we would still have them do kind of the same stuff for a while and use it as a check to like make sure that things are updating as we expect. But honestly, that's like really as far as I've gotten thinking in any detail about it, which is like not a great answer. I'm sorry, but hopefully that's helpful.
Perfect answer.
Okay. Now we can release you 3 minutes early.
Yeah.
Enjoy your break. And thank you all so much for